Can pro-lifers be anti-mask, or is that inherently against being pro-life? That's a question y'all have been asking me a lot on Instagram lately. We're going to get to that and the flip side of it, which is if you're conservative and you are actually really pro-mask, are you now being called a mask conservative sellout? We're going to talk about that. And then we're also going to get to some of your most asked questions on the pro-life issue, which is, are some Christians pro-abortion? And do pro-lifers care about babies after they are born? And can you be pro-life and still eat meat? Then how do you talk about abortion with your kids? We're going to talk about that and so much more on this episode of Deconstructing the Culture. I am your host, Elisa Steele. Hey friends, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the podcast. I just want to say a huge thank you for the many of you who not only watched and listened to last week's episode, but shared it. It was an episode that, and I say this as humbly as I can, I feel like is one of the most important episodes that I've made. We talked about human trafficking and specifically the church's role in human trafficking and what that role is, how they play that role, and what you and I can do as the body of Christ about human trafficking. It's very instructional. If you haven't listened to it, please take a moment to go back and listen to last week's episode on human sex slavery, especially within children. I did get a really profoundly touching message from one of y'all on Instagram that I wanted to share with you. I'm going to keep it anonymous, but one of you said this to me last Thursday. Thank you for your video on child sex trafficking. Sadly, I am one of those people who never knew that this was happening and never knew the severity of the human slave industry. It has never been spoken about in any of the churches I've attended, and we have been to a great many of them as we are we were a military family. Just like you said, I don't ever remember hearing a sermon on abortion or pornography either. Thank God for giving us the wisdom to have these talks over and over again with our children. I just had no idea that pornography feeds into the industry, and it will be a new discussion to speak with our kiddos. Thank you again for really opening my eyes to the atrocities. While it makes me want to throw up, I will get that past my uncomfortableness and learn to be a voice in our community. Thank you so much for sending me that message, first of all. And thank you for listening to this podcast. It is truly meaningful to hear that feedback. When I do receive those messages from you guys, from my podcast family, it really it confirms that I'm not just speaking to an echo chamber, that hopefully I prayerfully go into every episode asking God to, shine the light in the way that I need to go and share the information that will be truly pertinent to you. I don't want this podcast to just be another news show, because that's not what this is. This is not where you're going to get your weekly news update. This is hopefully where you're going to hear, yes, maybe some news stories, but about cultural differences and happenings in our world that we need to be aware of, and that we can arm ourselves both with knowledge and also with just the spiritual fortitude that we need to face the world that we are facing and our children and grandchildren will be facing. So thank you for your messages, and for those of you who continually send me encouragement and feedback and information and topics that you'd like me to cover. Really means a lot. And on that note, if you haven't subscribed and left a review, that would be amazing if you could take a moment to do that now. And if you've already done that, share this episode, share last week's episode, share any episodes that have touched you on a core level with a friend. That would be very meaningful to me. All right, we're going to dive into some questions. I've had a lot of questions come in, especially in the last few weeks, that I just want to go over because I've been promising you that I will cover these topics. And especially when there are so many on specific topics, I want to go ahead and address those. So we're going to talk about pro-life questions that I've received from you guys lately. Now, Kelly asked, she said, do you really run into Christians who actually believe abortion is okay? When you said this, I was dumbfounded. I said this just to clarify on an earlier episode. I know that I know that as the church, we are not vocal in our beliefs, but how can you know God's word and not know abortion is murder? So to answer, I actually talked a little bit one-on-one with Kelly. But yes, the answer is yes. I very frequently run into so-called Christians, putting air quotes around that, who believe that abortion is either okay in the cases of rape and incest, or a common line that I'll hear is, I wouldn't have an abortion, but I can't tell other people what to do. Um, so to address those two, separately, I'm going to talk about rape and incest a little bit later on as well. But to address the first one, I wouldn't get an abortion, but I can't tell other people what to do, is a very, very common one I hear from so-called Christians. And to that, I just call PS. I'm sorry, but that's like saying, you know what? I wouldn't steal from my next door neighbor, but hey, if someone else wants to steal from them, who am I to say that that's wrong? Who am I to call the cops and put a stop to that? Who am I to say that, other people can't steal? And stealing and theft is such a small matter when we're talking about life and death. If you are pro-life and you believe in God's word and you believe that we are made in God's image from conception, that God knew us before we were conceived in our mother's womb, but and even if you just believe in science, basic science, that a new human being is started at conception, that's when brand new DNA and a new life is started, then you're going to know that this is a life and death issue. This is not even something that you can really accurately compare to theft. It's more accurately to say, I wouldn't kill my next door neighbor, but you know what? If someone else needs to kill my next door neighbor, who am I to say that's wrong? So that is my just first off response to so-called Christians who believe that, I wouldn't choose abortion, but I can't tell others what to do. No, you can and you should. And if you fail to stand up and call good from bad, true from false, evil from darkness and evil from light and goodness, then are you really being a Christian and standing up and being salt of the earth and standing up for, Christ's teachings? As far as rape or incest, this is a touchy one, a very, very touchy one, because there are still a lot of Christians who do believe that there should be exceptions for rape and incest. And I have a very difficult time understanding this, even myself. I don't want to get too particular, but one religion in specific that comes to mind for me, and I'm not saying that all people of this religion believe this way, but many do, is the Mormon faith, the LDS, Latter-day Saints faith. Their current prophets teach that abortion is not okay, except with the exceptions of rape or incest. Now, my question has always been and will always be for members of the LDS Church who believe that is if it's a human child, if you are admitting that it's a human child and wrong to take that child's life because the mother doesn't want a baby, then why is it morally acceptable to then take what you've declared and acknowledged as human life and to take that human life and kill that human being simply because of the sins of the father? The Bible does say to not punish the children for the sins of the father, and that is exactly what you do in the cases of rape and incest. You are saying the father committed a grave and evil sin, and out of that sin came a brand new miracle of human life, a human being created in God's image. And we're saying because the father sinned, now we're going to take the child's life. And that is wrong. That doesn't make any sense to me on a theological and on a faith level. As a Christian, I don't believe that the two beliefs can go hand in hand. I think you're either completely pro-life and you believe, as I do as a Christian, and most, I don't even know about most, but many, many Christians believe that we are image bearers of God and we should protect human life, innocent human life. And I don't think that you can make that go hand in hand with, well, but if the father sins, then it's okay to kill that human. It's just not okay. But yes, the answer is you do find that. And that is my most common two things that I hear from so-called Christian pro-lifers. Christian pro-lifers who believe in exceptions. Danny asks, hey, I just wanted to ask your opinion on something that's actually my sister who believes this, and I can see both sides of the argument, but honestly can't decide on a side. She basically thinks that men shouldn't expect their wives to have kids or want kids at all because they don't have to go through it. So they don't get a say because they don't have to go through it. Your thoughts? And then she posted a picture of what it looks like her sister posted, which is, I really think every guy should have to go through a simulated labor before asking his woman to have kids. and be sleep deprived for a year. That way he knows what he's actually asking of her. Oops, but no one's ready for that conversation. Yeah, we are ready for that conversation, and it's a simple answer, and that is, will men ever fully truly understand everything that goes into creating a human life and carrying a human for realistically 10 months? No, men can't understand that, but that's okay. That's not what God created their bodies to do. That's not the role he created them to do. That doesn't mean that a man shouldn't shouldn't go into marriage wanting to have children with his wife. Now, obviously, I would strongly recommend that anyone, before they get married, have the child discussion, and make sure that it is vitally important that you make sure you are on the same page with someone before you get married, man, or husband or wife. It is absolutely vital that you know where they're at with children. This is one of the very first conversations my husband and I had when we were just children dating, is, how do you feel about kids? Because for me, and for him too, on a different level, for me, but speaking from my own perspective, this has always been a deal breaker. I knew that I wanted children. I knew that I wanted to be a mother, whether that is biologically or adoption or fostering. It's extremely important to me. And so, of course, that's going to be one of the number one questions I ask next to, do you have a relationship with Christ? Um, obviously not higher, just below, but it's very, very vital. But to say that women hold absolutely all the power, and they should be able to dictate whether or not a husband and wife unit have children because she has to carry them. No. Well, guess what? Can she ever fully understand what it's like to be the spiritual leader of a home and be responsible for the male role, for the father role? She can never be a father, no matter how hard she tries. She cannot fulfill the role of a father, and the spiritual and physical and guidance and the leadership that comes along with being a father. So, no, to say that, essentially what this sister sounds like she's alluding to, is that men shouldn't expect their wives to have kids or want kids at all, because she's going to go through pain and discomfort to bring that child onto this earth. No. And you know what? Men do and should always be held, for those who maybe aren't married and you're having a child out of wedlock, of course men should be held accountable. That's what child support is for. And we have a society and a culture that tries to promote the idea that, yes, men should be equally responsible. Next one. Caitlin asked, "Hey, I'm pro-life for sure, but there are a few things I'm having trouble with in my beliefs. Should we handle women who have been raped and how should we handle women who have been raped and wish to have an abortion? Another common pro-choice argument I have trouble answering is, why are we so concerned with new babies and less so with all the children in our country who don't have proper care? Thank you. I just want to be informed because some questions are hard to answer." So it's a two-part question. Caitlin, thank you for asking. This is very common. A lot of you struggle with these same questions when you're asked. The first part is, how do we handle women who have been raped and wish to have an abortion? With tenderness and care and so much compassion bleeding out of us, because she has been traumatized. She has been violated. She has had her human rights violated. And that is going to take healing, no matter how you put it, no matter how you look at it. As a sexual assault survivor myself, I understand that this is incredibly traumatic. At the same time, understanding the trauma that she has been through, also helping her to understand, because, and I know it sounds terrible to phrase it this way, but quite bluntly, just between me and you, I'm not saying I would not phrase it necessarily this way to a woman who is in this situation, but explaining to this woman in maybe different, more tender language, that just because she has been traumatized and her human rights have been violated in such an intimate way as to be sexually assaulted and raped, it does not give us as a woman or as a mother, because she is a mother now if she's pregnant, it does not give the woman or the mother the right to violate another human being's fundamental human rights. That's really what it comes down to. She has been violated. She has been traumatized, but it does not mean that she can turn around and violate and traumatize a human being in such an irreparable way. And not only that, but whether or not she can understand it in the moment, she is bringing upon, just in a selfish perspective, she is bringing on even more trauma to herself because she has been through an extreme amount of trauma and violation. But killing her unborn child isn't going to bring her healing. There is no amount of abortion procedure that's going to heal her or undo her rape or undo the trauma that she has suffered through. Now, is pregnancy and birth difficult? Yes, but it's nowhere near as difficult as the trauma inflicted upon your soul to violate, on such a fundamental level, violate someone else's human rights by killing them within the womb, and it's not going to heal her or make things better. So that is how you handle a situation where a woman has been raped and wishes to have an abortion. And that is with so much compassion and kindness, but also explaining and trying to reverse the cultural trend that we have, that a child born from rape is somehow responsible for the sins of the father. Killing that child doesn't punish or kill the rapist. It doesn't hurt them. You are literally giving the death sentence to an innocent party. Your second part of the question is, why are we so concerned? This is an accusation that the left loves to throw at us. Why are we so concerned with new babies and less so with the children of our country who don't have proper care? The answer is, we of course care about the children in our country who don't have proper care. I dare you to find a pro-lifer who's like, the foster system, nah, it's fine the way it is. Oh, children who don't have families, it's fine. They'll survive. Like, whatever. I don't care. No, you're not ever going to find, ever. You're not going to find a pro-lifer who's just like completely ambivalent and fine with children who are being abused or neglected. You're not going to find it. It doesn't exist. If a person cares about the preborn and not having them slaughtered in the womb, 100% guarantee that they care about the children who are being neglected and don't have proper care. The difference is, and to rephrase your question in a way that maybe makes more sense, is why is it that we spend so much effort and time and marching and extreme amounts of time, effort, and energy spent on the pro-life cause? Why do we spend so much time on that? Because these are the children being mass slaughtered. These are the children who need a voice almost more than any other children on this earth, because they have zero voice, they have zero rights, they have no one else advocating for them. And to say that we don't care about other children because we're focused on the preborn is the equivalent of going to the American Cancer Society and being like, why are you talking so much about cancer? Why are you focused so much on cancer? Don't you know that there are diabetics out there? I mean, why aren't you talking more about diabetes? Because that's not their cause. That's not their mission. That's not their calling. They're specializing in cancer. Or else it's even more pinpointed. It's like going to the Breast Cancer Society and saying, why are you talking about breast cancer? Why can't you just talk about all cancers? All cancers matter. Why are you specifically focused on breast cancer? Because that's their specialty. That's what they're focusing their energy on. They're not trying to go an inch deep and a mile wide. They're trying to specifically target an issue and find a solution. And that's what the pro-life movement is. It's specifically targeting just completely egregious atrocity and focusing their efforts in that area. It doesn't mean we don't care about the other cancers. We don't care about the other children who are born. It just means that this is what we're specifically focusing on within the pro-life movement. It's very simple in that explanation. But of course, we love our leftists who love to throw at us, oh, you don't care about other children because you're speaking up for these children specifically. Okay. It's like saying anyone who, during the time of the Holocaust, anyone speaking out against the concentration camps, that they don't care about anything else bad happening in the world, because why are they talking about the Holocaust so much and the concentration camps? Why are you so focused on that? There's other bad things happening in the world. Yes, I know, but we're trying to specifically draw attention to this issue. So that is that answer. Let's see. Another one is Lindsay asked, I know it's inevitable that my son will one day ask what abortion is, and I want to approach this subject delicately, yet not shying around the hard facts. It's hard to talk about the subject in an age-appropriate way. My oldest has yet to ask me, but I know he someday soon will, he's an inquisitive little one, how would you approach the subject? I don't know how old your oldest is, so I can't give you specific advice for that child. And obviously, even if I knew his age, it depends on age, it depends on temperament, it depends on their maturity, it depends on how much they already know. Also, how much are they going to be exposed to it? Are they homeschooled? Are they in public school? Are their peers and where you're at going to be talking about this more aggressively than in other areas? So, I mean, there's a lot of variables, but the answer is always, always going to be honesty. It's going to be honesty. And that is, with the right child, right age, right temperament, you have to gauge that as the parent. There's no one more qualified than you. Do not leave this up to even church, not that they're going to talk about it in church with your child, but don't leave this up to the school system. Don't leave this up to his peers or his teachers. You, mama or dad, you are the most qualified person to talk about abortion with your child. You are going to know them best. And the thing is they will probably be traumatized to some extent. And the reason why being is this is a traumatizing issue. It's like trying to talk about the horrors of the Holocaust for the very first time with a child and expecting them to not be deeply imprinted upon and traumatized by how evil and how deeply dark that situation is. There's no way for you to 100% protect them from the horror and the evil when they're looking it directly in the eyes. So of course there is going to be some very disrupted emotions there, and it's going to make an impression on them, as it honestly should, because when we stare evil in the eyes, it should make an impression on us, and especially the most vulnerable and the most innocent among us, our children. Of course, that's going to strike their soul on a core level. So be honest with them. I can't tell you exactly how that conversation is going to look, but I know firsthand from having had these conversations or watched these conversations happen with my own very young siblings who are still at home, that honesty is always the best policy. You don't have to go into gory details. You just answer simply and plainly what they ask of you. What is abortion? Well, honey, abortion is when a mom decides that she doesn't want her baby to grow in her anymore and she allows an abortionist to kill it. That's horrifying. You don't need to tell them how the child is killed or explain the difference between an abortion via a pill or abortion via suction. No, you don't need to go into all of that and give them a complete breakdown of abortion, its atrocities. You can answer in simplicity and age appropriateness for them and their maturity at that level. All right, before I continue on, I'm going to ask you to please subscribe and leave a review, share with a friend. In a world that does not love to spread conservatism or the pro-life message or Christianity in general, you know what? It's a lot harder to not be suppressed by Facebook and Instagram and the many channels where my podcast and my posts grow, but by your sharing it makes a huge difference. So please go ahead and subscribe, leave a review, and share. Now, before we go on to our next couple of questions, I want to make sure that we get to the mask situation because that's been a really big one. And, I know a lot of people have been struggling with this, and it's interesting. I would have never put the two together, but people have been asking me, like, people have been telling me I can't be pro-life and not wear a mask. Well, that's ridiculous. But Katie asked specifically, I'm going to answer her question. I just had to pull it up. For some reason it didn't save in my notes for this podcast. But Katie asked, what should I do essentially if a store requires a mask? I've wrestled with this a lot. I feel a little bit like a sellout because I'm literally just doing as I'm told, like everyone else. I'm nervous that if I were to get fined or arrested, and when I weigh wearing a mask versus the consequences of not, I don't know if it's worth it or not. As a pro-lifer, I wrestled with this too. My husband, I actually had the virus back in March, got over it and recovered, thank God, but it was pretty terrible. We self-isolated. And then she says, I don't think most masks are very effective at preventing transmission, and the science seems to back this up. But should I wear one as a pro-lifer? I understand that this is different than directly causing harm through the intentional taking of a life, like abortion, but I don't know that argument always gets me. I don't want to be hypocritical, but anyways, I believe our liberties are being slowly stripped away, and the mask laws are just one part of this. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on this. Katie, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think I know that you are speaking your mind and speaking from your heart, and sharing a question that many of you are struggling with is, first off, are you a sellout if you decide to wear a mask? No, no, no. I'm going to say this again, and this is someone who I don't particularly believe in masks. I think that the science is dubious, and I'm not really sure. They maybe masks do something, maybe they don't. That's not what matters to me. What does matter to me is coming together as conservatives. We do not need to be divisive about this. We do not need to be bullying each other about this. Now, what I am dead set against, 100%, I feel like I've said this a million times, is I'm not anti-mask, but I am anti-mandated mask by our government. That is not the proper role of government. You can listen to my last couple of episodes this month and you will hear all about this, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the mask issue. But no, you can wear a mask and you're not a sellout. I had another person ask me and tell me, hey, I think my job's going to require that I wear a mask. I'm thinking I should quit over this. That's your call. You can make that call. Personally, would I make that call? Would I quit a job over having to wear a mask? Probably not. But it's a case by case scenario that is solely up to you, and you need to, be taking steps prayerfully. I'm not saying if you have quit your job over the mask issue that you're in the wrong. I'm just saying I probably wouldn't make that decision. But that is a person by person situation that you need to figure out, and I'm not going to call someone a sellout if they decide not to quit their job over a mask, or a sellout because they decide, you know what, today I don't want to face jail time today. I'm going to wear a mask. Or else, you know what, I kind of really need to fly somewhere and I cannot board the plane unless I wear a mask. I'm not going to call you a sellout. And I think it's ridiculous if my fellow conservatives are calling you a sellout. Okay, calm down. Okay, don't be a Karen. Not a huge fan of that phrase, but it's appropriate for right now. So here's the thing though. Of course, I understand if you're nervous about getting fined or arrested. I too have elevated cortisol levels every time I run errands because my county requires masks and I haven't been wearing a mask. I get cortisol levels that are going through the roof. I've been kicked out of stores, being told, hey, if you're not going to wear a mask, you need to leave. Okay, then. And I left. Now, the first part of it is, what should I do if a store requires it? I personally think, and I believe, that private businesses have every right to do whatever the heck they want. If you're Costco and you want to require a mask, I might not agree with it, but I'm not going to condemn you for making masks your policy. If it makes your employees feel better, if it makes you feel like you're more protected from liability or lawsuits, if it makes you feel like you're going to get more shoppers because maybe your shoppers will feel safer, then you know what, that's your call to make. Private businesses can do whatever they want. Of course, I draw the line hardcore at the government. The government has no right to mandate masks. That is where I 100% will not cross the line and say it's okay. Private businesses, that's a different story. Again, I talked about this more in other episodes. Feel free to go back and listen to it. As far as being pro-life, and if you can be pro-life and not wear a mask, or if you're pro-life, should you have to wear a mask? No, that's not the case. I've heard a lot of people try and conflate the two, but I've had a lot of people try and conflate, you can't say you're pro-life and be for the death penalty, which I'm not going to get into right now. But you can try and conflate things all day long. Being pro-life specifically is about saying unborn humans have rights. It's not a overarching broad term you can just throw everything and try and guilt someone into an argument that doesn't make sense. No, you can absolutely be anti-mask and you can be pro-life. You can say, hey, I believe that unborn children have rights in the womb, and also say, hey, the government cannot mandate me, and also I can choose. I have the freedom to choose if I'm going to wear a mask when there's a sickness going on. Because those of you who are saying you have to wear a mask or else you're not pro-life, well then why aren't you applying the exact same thing to you have to wear a mask during flu season or else you're not pro-life? In fact, any disease, anytime, any season can be spread. So if you're going to try and make the argument that you have to wear a mask for coronavirus or else you are not pro-life, then you need to go all the way. You need to really commit to your argument, and you have to wear a mask all day, every day in public because somebody somewhere could get sick with something you have, whether that's strep throat or coronavirus or the flu or the common cold. So don't you dare try and use this argument to guilt people into wearing a mask, because that's all it is. It's an emotional guilting argument. And unless you're going to go full throttle with it and wear a mask for the rest of your life in public because you might get someone somewhere sick with a common cold who has who is immune compromised and then dies later. No, sorry honey, not going to go for it. All right. Now, let's continue on. Remember to subscribe and leave a review. Let's try and I just lost my spot. Where was I? Okay, here we go. So, Nicole asks, "Hi there. I'd just like to ask, do you think a non-sentient clump of cells is more important than a fully alive pregnant woman?" No, actually, I believe they have the same importance because they are both human beings. Doesn't matter. Sentience doesn't determine your human status. Being a sentient human being doesn't give you value as a human being or not, because there are non-sentient human beings who are still human beings and they deserve the protection of their human rights, which is to live. So do I believe that a clump of cells is more important than a woman? No, I believe they have the same importance. It's pretty simple. If you're a human being, then you have human rights, and one of those human rights is to not be murdered. End of story. And this person goes on to give their personal opinion that abortion is about the health and safety of living people. Yeah, I agree, which is why we should protect unborn children, because unborn children are living human beings and their health and safety should also be protected. But the main difference is they believe that abortion is not taking a human life, and that's where our paths very much diverge, and we really can't come together if you don't believe if you don't believe in science, which says that human life starts at conception. Then I'm sorry, you're just an anti-sciencer, and there's not much I can do to convince you if you truly just don't believe an unborn human being is a human being. This person goes on to say that yes, safe sex is important, but not all pregnancies are intentional. Yes, they say, many women fall victim to rape and don't want to bear the child of a rapist. I'm not saying that women who are sexually assaulted and conceive through rape, it doesn't mean that they have to raise those children. Adoption is a beautiful choice from every part, from the woman, letting her child be adopted to the family adopting the child. That is beautiful. But here's the thing though, and this person continues on to end with basically like, many people who get pregnant are young teens and aren't mentally or physically ready for a child. You know what? You're right. Some teenagers are not mentally or physically ready to raise a child, but if their body can support that pregnancy, then they're actually physically ready to give birth, whether or not they're emotionally ready. But they're also not emotionally ready to kill their offspring. I don't think anyone is ever ready, emotionally or mentally ready, to kill their human child within their body. That's very, very traumatic. And that's really what it comes down to, is this person asking this question is, why should women go through the trauma of giving birth? And my question is, okay, yeah, birth can be traumatic, but it's not the most traumatic thing to ever happen to a human being. It's happened for all of human history. Giving birth is natural. And in many cases, as someone who is pregnant right now and about to give birth here in the next month or so, birth is considered a beautiful experience when a woman wants it, but somehow the worst, most undescribably traumatic thing you can put a young person through if they don't want it. You can't have both at the same time. Birth is something every one of our mothers had to go through to get us to be here. It's a beautiful act of sacrifice. And no, it is not the most traumatic thing that you can put a young girl through who's not ready to raise a child. But you know what? It is way, way, infinitely more traumatic to put a young child or a teenager through who's not ready to raise a child, killing her child within her body. And then the physical trauma and risks that come with abortion, which I've talked about in other episodes, from permanently potentially not being able to have children again or support any other pregnancies for the rest of her life, which is a risk, to death with abortion. And every case, if you look at the actual studies, going through with an abortion is always going to be more dangerous in every way, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, for a woman than going through with the pregnancy and then allowing her child to be adopted if she is truly not ready to raise that child. That's the answer to your question. Becca asks, "Hey, I love all your posts and look to them for inspiration when people try to change their mind about being pro-life." Thank you, Becca. Here's an unpopular opinion though. If someone is vegan or vegetarian, then they are hypocrites if they are pro-choice. What do you think? I'm personally a uh, basically she only eats fish, and she continues on that she thinks that all lives have a purpose, even unborn children um, and animals. I do think it's hypocritical. I do think it's hypocritical for vegetarians and vegans to care so much about life, but not care about human life. So if you're a vegetarian or a vegan and you're like, save the animals, bro, but hey, it's totally fine to kill human offspring, that's totally hypocritical. I've also been asked, not by this person specifically, Becca, but by others, if you're going to say you're pro-life, don't you have to be a vegetarian or a vegan? And the answer to that is no, you don't. Because if you're a Christian, and a lot of this, does rely on Christianity, but the thing is human beings are innately different. They are different creations. God created man in his image. We are image bearers of God. It is a very different story to take a human life, an image bearer of God, to take their life, is very, very, very different from an animal's life. So no, if you're going to be pro-life, you don't have to be vegetarian or vegan. You can still eat meat because animals are here for our use. Obviously, the Bible does talk about animal treatment, and I've talked about this in other episodes and reference Bible verses where the Bible does specify, hey, yes, we should care for animals. They should have it. Even the Bible specifically mentions animals in the Ten Commandments and says even your animals should have a day of rest. Actually, I don't remember if that one was in the Ten Commandments, but in the Bible, in the Old Testament, does specifically say to give your animals a day of rest. And the thing is yes, we should care for animals and treat them humanely. I do not believe in animal abuse, and I think we do have a fair amount of animal abuse in our food industry today that definitely needs to be addressed. But that's another topic for another day. All I'm saying is that yes, when we're treating our animals humanely, when we are treating them with respect, when we're being good stewards of the gifts and the tools that God has provided to us as human beings, then yes, it's absolutely okay to eat animals. But do you have to completely say no animals ever? If I'm pro-life, no, that's not the case, because we're not eating image bearers of God. We're eating animals who are distinctly different than human beings. All right. I think this is going to be our last question, and we are definitely out of time. Emily asked, "I'm pro-life, and I was wondering, how can you be pro-life but against free birth control pills? Birth control pills prevent abortions, so shouldn't you be willing to pay that in taxes? How are taxes that literally save unborn babies' lives not worth it? Being against that makes no sense whatsoever if you actually want to prevent abortions." Great question, Emily. This is actually a really good question that a lot of people don't understand because they don't actually understand birth control. So one of my number one episodes that has been listened to and still continues to be listened to is an episode called Birth Control. Very simple to find. Definitely recommend you go check it out if you have not listened to it. And I talk about the different kinds of birth control and what most Christians and even just Americans, Christian or non-Christian, don't understand, and the reason why pro-lifers are not for, or conservatives were not for free birth control. We know it's not really free. American taxpayers have to pay for it. The fact is you and I shouldn't have to pay, or I personally, I'll just speak for myself here, I should not have to pay for your sex life, quite frankly. No, I should not have to pay for your birth control, and that comes directly out of my pocket. First of all, it's not the proper role of government to have tax-paying Americans pay for everyone else's sex life. From a constitutional level, that doesn't make any sense. But then also on a moral level, and want to talk about very in depth with all the different kinds of, most of the main types of birth control in the birth control episode, is that many, many birth control devices today actually can and do indeed have the chance of actually being part of the abortion problem. And let me just very briefly explain that, and you can find more answers in the birth control episode. But some birth control actually acts a lot like abortion and will take a fertilized egg and not allow it to implant into the lining of the uterus. And then another one is birth control culture actually promotes abortion. The reason being is that when you promote the idea that you can separate sex, the act of sex, and the carnal or love-making act of sex, and separate that from children entirely, you create this mind frame in America specifically where the two can be separated. And the truth is, the two cannot be separated. No birth control is 100% effective. Even when used properly, it is never 100% effective. So the more you push this idea on Americans that the two can be separated, procreation from sex, then the more unplanned pregnancies you're going to have. And then you're already going to have a whole lot of people having sex, consensual sex, but not wanting children. And so therefore, they find themselves in a situation where they had consensual sex, but they don't like the consequences. They're not in a committed, married, stable two-parent relationship. And so therefore, they decide to take that child's life. So for those two reasons, that is why I'm not for free birth control, or I should say those three reasons. Birth control acts as abortion in many cases. Birth control feeds into the abortion culture, and also birth control and paying for other people's sex lives is not the proper role of government. So Emily, thank you so much for your question. Thank you everyone else for your questions. There are so many more questions I did not even get to today. I mostly just went with pro-life questions today to try and get them into one concise episode. But I have so many other questions from y'all that I'm going to do either a live stream or another podcast episode answering your questions, because I did tell so many of you I would get to your questions, and I will get to them eventually. All right, for this week's Good in the World is a story from actually, I'm citing this from Live Action. And Live Action is one of my favorite pro-life organizations. I've talked about them in the past. They're a wonderful, amazing organization that helps the pro-life movement tremendously. Definitely go check them out. But something that I thought was interesting that came out actually just yesterday, depending on when you're listening to this episode, Kanye West made headlines again. He still thinks he's running for president, which I think is entertaining. But Kanye West came out after about 2 weeks ago. He announced his decision to run for president in 2020, and he had his first campaign event in Charleston, South Carolina on Sunday, July 19th. Now, obviously, we know he's not a stranger to controversy. He was just recently made the news talking about how Planned Parenthood has white supremacist background, which is absolutely true, and I've talked about that on other episodes. And definitely on my Instagram post, Margaret Sanger was an avowed eugenicist and spoke for the KKK. So he actually talked about abortion, and it got really personal. And he told the crowd that when the baby's conceived, at that point, it's a soul. It's a real living thing. That 6-month-old baby, it's a real living thing. It's real at that point, says God. He also likened the separating of a baby from his or her mother in abortion under the "my body, my choice" mantra. And he compared that to killing a child, a born child, because a woman decides that she no longer wants it, as saying like "my house, my choice." So essentially being like, hey, if you're saying "my body, my choice," that's like saying you have a child in your home and killing your born child and saying it's "my house, my choice," which is an interesting argument. But most strikingly, he actually talked about his personal experience with abortion. He said that when his wife became pregnant with their daughter, North, he says, quote, "I was living the rapper's lifestyle. She said she was pregnant, and for 1 month and 2 months and 3 months, we talked about not having this child. She had the pills in her hand. These pills, if you take these pills, that's a wrap. The baby's gone." West said he believed God spoke to him during the time when he was in Paris, and that's why he decided that abortion was not the right plan. He said, "I'm in the apartment in Paris, and I have my laptop up, and the screen went black and white, and God says, if you bleep with my vision, I'm going to bleep with yours." He said he spoke to his wife, Kim Kardashian, on the phone, and she said, "We're going to have this baby," and I said, "We're going to have this child." And he went on to say his wife, quote, "brought North into this world even when I didn't want to. She stood up and protected the child." And then he continued on, dropping another bombshell, saying, "You know what else? Who else protected a child? 43 years ago, who do you think protected a child? My mom saved my life. My dad wanted to abort me. My mom saved my life. There would have been no Kanye West because my dad was too busy, he said, breaking down in tears. There would have been no Northwest, he added, then raising his voice to a shout while still weeping, I almost killed my daughter. I almost killed my daughter. I'm sharing this story as good in the world because I have feelings about Kanye West, meaning I don't have a whole lot of respect for him. I don't like him as an artist. I don't think his music is very good. I also think he has some very interesting ideas politically that I definitely do not agree with. But the fact that he's talking about the pro life movement, while it might be imperfect, and maybe he will, and probably more than likely he will stumble when talking even about the pro life movement, he's talking about it and he's reaching an audience you and I will never be able to reach. We're talking about a whole huge swath of young people on TikTok and definitely not being raised in maybe even conservative families who are going to be introduced to truths about the pro life movement that you and I might not have ever been able to reach them, especially not with the same mindset or even an open mind at all. So I state this as a good in the world, not only because Kanye West didn't abort his daughter North, um, but also because this is good that he is speaking. And I'm going to call good good and stupid stupid when he does stupid things, just like I would with any other person in the public limelight. And I'm going to call this good and call for the good that it is because he is reaching people I know for sure I would never be able to reach. And that is amazing. This is the pro life generation. This is the generation that will see Roe v. Wade reversed, that will see abortion plummet and drop, that will see abortion clinics close, that will see an army of prayer warriors come forward to protect God's babies, his image bearers in the womb. And for this, I'm excited for this part. And I know that there's a lot of chaos going on in our world, but we can find the good and see the good and promote it and praise it and forward it with all of our prayers and all of our might. This is Deconstructing the Culture. I am your host, Elisa Steele. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for watching or listening to this podcast. It really is amazing. If you're watching on YouTube, please go ahead and click subscribe. I tell you where the subscribe button is, but if you don't already know, then you're probably not ever going to learn the internet. So if you know where it's at, you know where it's at. Go subscribe, and also hit the little notification bell so that you don't miss the episodes. Right now, I'm sorry, but subscriptions are a dime a dozen. I also need you to hit the subscribe and then the notification button so that you actually don't miss my content when it comes out, especially because since I've been pregnant and with coronavirus, as you've noticed, my podcast episode, when it actually comes out on Monday, can sometimes be a little unpredictable, which is why you need that notification bell. So as soon as it does come out, you're like, hey, Elisa finished recording, editing, and posting. So go ahead and hit subscribe, leave that review on iTunes, and go ahead and, more importantly than anything else, share this. Share this on your Instagram, share this on your Twitter, share this on the Facebook, the Book of the Face, and help me out because it's me and you, baby. We're in this together. We're going to talk about the pro-life movement. We're going to talk about the tough issues like sex trafficking. We're going to talk about pornography, and we're going to talk about all of the cultural relevant issues in a biblical worldview that's going to help us unite and come together and find the answers that we're looking for in the community that we all need. Thank you. God bless.